all these big brands put something out there that sounded the same, said the same words. And now we're seeing like a sort of a second wave that within those constraints, people are starting to get creative.
It's kind of like the great paradox of creative risk and creative courage, really, not even risk. I have been meditating for a little over 6 years. So again, the natural creativity that's in all of us just arises.
And you can sort of like watch your imagination with more, with more attentiveness, with more clarity, and pick out the things you need from there and bring those into the present to be part of your idea or, of the solution that you're creating. Antonio, finally we're doing this, man.
We are.
Yes.
We've been talking about this for, I feel like, at least 6 months.
Yeah, at least a year.
Maybe 6 years.
Yeah. Yeah, this is awesome, man. It's great. It's great, to have this chat about creativity and like creativity at, at work, at what we do. When we get together as friends, we just talk about other stuff, what's going on in Brazil, how the barbecue is going, how cold the beer is. But we never get to talk a little bit deeper about the things we believe, the things we like, the things we love about creativity, the things we love about our work.
We're talking about barbecue creativity.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing we're gonna talk about is the thing everybody's talking about. Like we just hit a massive point of uncertainty in the world, and people ask me a lot too. People who are doing my my online course and everything. Like, how does that impact creativity? How does that change how we're supposed to, to do our work, to do our jobs?
Certainly not a lot of barbecues, for one thing.
I barbecued today, but just for my family.
Yeah, monocues, I call them.
Yeah, monocues. I like it. Yeah, so that's the main thing. I mean, in terms of like for you, in terms of, I know obviously the way you do your work changed, like working from home and things like that. But has it changed for you the content or the way you have to come up with your creative work?
Well, let's take a quick step back, actually, think about, because I think the first point you made there was, to me, even more interesting, which is the general kind of relation between creativity and these moments, right? And creativity and challenging times, and creativity in the context of having to rise to the occasion, not waiting for a muse, not waiting for inspiration, but just acting, doing things. And I think that is really, it's something that we see happen over and over again, right? And we kind of pretend that we forget. And look, first thing I would say is actually it matters that everybody's safe and tries to be healthy, and it's not to dismiss any of that, but I think this should be a light conversation. I think there's plenty of more serious COVID-related conversations out there, but again, not to dismiss the seriousness of it. I think there's an opportunity, right, in the moment to be taken, and I think it involves a lot of creativity, and even in the deeper level, the deeper sense of being creative with how we go about even trying things, not just creative ideas and executions, but like complete pivots of how to even go about doing things. And I think we're seeing that forced upon many industries right now. In autos, for instance, we're seeing the complete reinvention of the dealership and car sales and all that. And we can get more into that. But, I think the kind of very broad strokes thing, for me at least, is the creativity involved now in finding completely new ground, new ways to operate. And if you're going to have the most kind of hopeful outlook here, I would say the creativity that, is in us finding a better path forward as humanity. Not a single one of us is fully responsible for where we are, but we all have a part in it. And we're seeing now there's an opportunity to change completely the course of humanity.
Yeah, to create a new future.
To really do it, which might take decades in normal days, but now we're looking at it like okay, we have to do this now, right?
Yeah, it's like a massive worldwide experiment, you know? And it's a bit of a creative experiment as well, because there's this old saying, you know, you give someone constraints, you're giving them creativity as well, you know? You know, there's this old thing with saying creativity, you know, you need to have constraints so you can be creative within those constraints. And this is, and what's happening now with this pandemic, like new constraints are being generated about around everything, and people are needing to be creative to solve these new problems that arise. And like there's no option but to be creative. In you know, talking a little bit about advertising, we sort of saw two things when the pandemic hit, and everybody sort of like got really scared. People didn't know what was going on. um, the first wave of like new work that came out on TV and everywhere was very conservative. Was the sort of work that was like just said, you know, it's gonna be fine. We're still here. We got you. And we saw a lot of like brands putting out the exact same message out there. There's even like a few videos that made fun of that. How everybody's video, you know, all these big brands are, you know, put something out there that sounded the same, said the same words, had the same sort of music. And that first wave was like, all right, guys, we got you. It's going to be fine, right? And now we're seeing like a sort of a second wave that within those constraints, people are starting to get creative, which is like, all right, we can't go out and shoot with a crew uh, like we did. You know, we just can't do that. What are the other ways we can do things? So we're seeing a lot of like creativity coming out of that too. Um, you know, a lot of animation stuff's happening. A lot of like obviously like handheld found footage sort of stuff happening too. So like we were given these constraints, and now after that first wave of like being careful and being too safe, now those brands and you know, whoever's communicating is trying to find the more creative ways to work within those constraints. And obviously it's, you know, it's a terrible thing that everybody's going through, but it does force you to be more creative. And you know, that's one of the positives that we see coming out of that, you know, because people are, you know, a lot of great new things are going to be created, new ways of doing things, and that's going to like keep going into the future a little bit. You know, we're going to have to create new ways of doing things. Those new ways of doing things are still going to be here when we move forward away from the pandemic.
I think you're totally right there, that, you know, that some brands just felt like they might need to kind of cover that gap or show up in that moment in some ways. But it's one thing that we, you know, regardless of I want to say about any particular piece of content, is one thing that we heard debated a lot with us, which was, as we're kind of consulting with many different brands, as you know, I consult for different brands, which brands really had a place and not just an opportunity, but almost a responsibility to kind of communicate right off the bat. Or if not, if it wasn't necessary, it's almost like a metaphor for COVID-19 kind of lockdown in a way. It's like, if not necessary for you to be out there right now talking, then leave that space open for the ones that are like essential, right? And it's really hard to discern, because from the point of view of any particular company, they're essential. It's essential that they continue to communicate and be out there. But there was a lot of discussion that I saw very early on, even late February, early March, where it was around who should be talking at all. And, you know, because there are some businesses that actually have not just one kind of role in this, but many roles, right? Or that kind of serve as a platform for lots of things to happen. And there are other businesses that are things that we can kind of do without for a little bit, unfortunately being the case that we might have to. But, you know, so I think that I really like the point you were making about first wave, second wave, but also from the point of view of who, you know, in an open free market, which we have, it's okay for everybody to be talking at once, which is why we have this cacophony of messaging, and sometimes it gets kind of crazy. But in a situation where it's almost like an emergency siren or alarm, like the media landscape itself, we should be kind of reconsidering how to tap it for the time being, just because of all that's happening. Then it's a very kind of different, again, kind of stage to show up in and play a role in, and you know. So it's very interesting to me that the way we're kind of seeing different messages kind of land or not.
Yeah, and the landscape is in such a way now, like the media is so so broken up that, you know, everybody can still, you know, say something. I mean, it's the new normal, right? In our times, even before the COVID, so you have information coming from, you know, every different direction to you. It's not like back in the day where everybody watched the same 6 o'clock news, you know. The information is fragmented, people see different things, and that, you know, that kind of brings us to the second point we wanted to discuss, which is like, you know, how does that sort of landscape affect, you know, the way things are created. I listened to a very cool podcast the other day by Seth Godin. I don't know if you follow him. You know, he's a great marketer. He has like a bunch of like really cool insights, and he was like taking us through in the podcast how creativity changed as TV went from like a monopoly, not a monopoly, but like from having 3 networks that had like the whole audience that you know, split the, you know, share the whole audience amongst those 3, and what happened to TV shows as that got more fragmented, as cable came in, and like suddenly there were like 10 or 50 channels, and then like the internet came in, and like Netflix and streaming, and now like the, you know, the options are, you know, it's just like it's endless. It's endless. It's not like you don't only have like 3 options like you had back in the day. You can just watch whatever you want. And as he was talking about that, he was pointing out how more bold or more risky the ideas in the TV shows became, you know, because back in the day when they had 3 networks, nobody could put out like a crazy bold show that might offend people or alienate a big chunk of the audience, because they're talking to everybody, you know. And now that's more fragmented, you know, it's easier and better, even like if you're a little bit different, if you know, take a risk here or there to appeal to a certain kind of person that you want to bring into your audience.
Well, it's kind of like the great paradox of creative risk and creative courage. Really, not even risk. Risk is, if you calculate risk, then they're in, you know, which you're pointing out too, which is, I think, when you have that captive audience and only 3 networks deciding what goes, you don't have to take those creative risks. Exactly. Because you've already kind of landed that audience. Once you open the marketplace for competitiveness and you have multiple you know, content makers coming out with many different things, then that's where that paradox shifts into, well, if I don't innovate but the next person does, then he or she will have a kind of much bigger lead on me very quickly, or capture my audience, and I won't be able to go simply back to them and say, hey, come back to the safe thing, and they won't come back. Yeah. So this very fear of risk is actually what can actually flip and motivate risk to be taken, so that things can progress. And it's really interesting to me that, you know, I always say like the biggest risk is to be too risk averse, because
exactly
somebody else is going to go and do something very interesting and touch something in people that's deeper or more real, and speaks to them more, or comes from a bigger truth, because they're going there again.
Yeah, these are the times now. Like, you know, these are the times we live in, and it's great for creativity because people have an incentive to be bold now, you know. And two things that I wanted to point out. That's one thing. That is a great time for, for really being authentic and bold on our creativity, because we were able to capture a segment of an audience. You can make things that are like for those specific people rather than for everybody. The second point is, I see that happening as well. We all can see that happening in advertising when you're talking about leading brands versus challenger brands. Brands who lead the market, they are usually a little bit more conservative on their message, on how they talk to their audience, because they don't have to take the risk because they're in front. When you look at the work that comes from challenger brands, it's much more risky. It's much more edgy.
Challenging, if you will.
Yeah. So like they take the risk to try and jab at the leader's audience and try and take those people. They take a little bit more risk because of that.
Yeah, I mean, it is in a very, very kind of simplistic, even not just simplified way, but simplistic way. It's the less you have to lose, the more you go after, and vice versa. The more you have to lose or at stake, if you will, the more you're going to try to steer that ship carefully because it's full of cargo, right? So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's as bureaucracy, as structure, as verticality, whatever you want to call it, multiple things there that make any enterprise, be it a commercial one or not, bigger. It's really difficult to maintain that kind of quickness and also interest and continuing to be risky. And I think some of the bigger kind of companies that we see out there, they even are very aware of this, and so they dedicate a portion or create a department, or even create an entire company within the company, if you will, dedicated to that, so that they don't lose sight of that, even as they continue to become more structuralized and solid in a way. So it's harder to be flexible as you kind of grow. But it's an interesting thing. I think that we've kind of crossed that point where that mentality that probably came from, all the way after Industrial Revolution to the mid 50s, 60s here in America, at least, where it was very structured. You had a career path, you had a ladder steps to follow, and you knew exactly where you're supposed to go. It was easier to be risk averse. I think that the new companies that are out there now, and especially you call them challenger, but that's because they're new mostly, right? They understand that you have to kind of have the two sides of the coin like very well kind of represented, and so you always have to be conservative about the right things, be it the environment, be it how to approach things legally, etc. But at the same time be very bold and risky, even, and creative and courageous, to continue to kind of break that ground and find new things, right?
Yeah, and I think there's new culture in big companies, which is a new thing, like people creating departments that only think about the future and like what to do next and to innovate. Yeah, so like Silicon Valley sort of like created this innovation culture that's sort of like trickling down to other massive companies in the US, which is great. There's this saying in Brazil, in Portuguese, that they say, não se mexe em time que tá ganhando, right? Like don't fix what's broken, sort of like would be the
don't fix what isn't broken.
Yeah, don't fix what isn't broken, which would be the equivalent. But I heard something that sounded very interesting to me. It was like, oh, should we wait for it to break so we can fix it or improve it? So even if you're on the top, you need to be thinking about innovating to stay at the top, right? So the times when you didn't have to do that, those times are gone, because things nowadays, they move way too fast.
They do indeed. You mentioned we transition to the second point here. Do you mind stating what that point is? Because I don't have it in front of me.
It was creativity in the information saturation era.
Okay, so we can do a little bit of an opener now for later. You can put it there. But okay, let's talk about creativity. What was it?
Creativity in the
Way too
information
complicated.
saturation era.
Uh,
We don't have to mention it, man.
yeah,
Just let it.
but
Let it.
yeah, creativity. Yeah, that there's a lot of information out there, and I think
Yeah.
we don't have to make that point too much more than it's been made a million times before. But yeah. For the first point we talked about, if you will, for a moment,
From
I
the
think
times
the
of
idea of,
uncertainty.
well, in general, yeah, but I think it's hard to not talk about right now, right, in this context. And it's funny you mentioned podcasts. I saw some podcasts where they kind of announce up front that they won't acknowledge um, COVID in that episode, or that they don't want it to. We're getting to that point of saturation, to your point, saturation of information, where this is saturation of chatter around this, and a lot of it is important, has to happen so we're informed and safe as possible, but a lot of it is extra that doesn't need to be happening, and it's creating this cacophony, right? And it's, you know, really hard to not talk about it, but at the same time, I think just back to creativity in general, which is more interesting to me. I think this idea of like the creativity in the head and the ideas and the kind of putting, you know, things down on paper, which is amazing, but right now action is really what's needed. You know, I think to your point about also things moving fast, they're moving even faster now with what happened. We've shifted, I think, at an impressive global scale and speed that we saw governments kind of trailing behind what even just people and corporations were doing. And I think we're seeing like this is the new kind of tempo of societies around the world, which is when it's really important to completely change something, or to completely invent something, or to revamp something from the ground up.
You can feel how everybody got really used to having things done fast, when they're saying like we have to wait for, you know, a year for a vaccine, and people are like, what do you mean everything here gets done so fast? And like, you know, to get a vaccine done and tested and produced, it takes
4 to 8 years is the real timeline that we got. I think it was I don't remember exactly.
I heard somewhere like I think I heard maybe 18 months before it could, you know, at least, you know, the earliest.
Well, that would break the record, I guess. What I'm just saying, I think it's Dr. Fauci or whatever. I don't want to quote anybody here either, but yeah. Regardless, it's a long time, and yeah.
But everybody wants it now, you know.
And now we have super fast computers in our hands. We have 3D printing machines in households. We have more shared information than ever before. We have Reddit and things like that, where a bit of information gets shot to the top quickly and disseminated very fast. And people are just doing. I think that people are just realizing why wait? You know, I can't wait, and why wait anyway? Just
they have the tools.
The tools are out there, you know, and we talked a lot about having the tools in the digital age with the beginning of the internet, the beginning of the personal computer, and those are amazing tools. But now we're getting crossed into the physical world of also having, you know, tool making, you know, tooling machines, if you will, where you can make things, you know, 3D printing obviously being just one of them. So yeah, I think we're seeing that people are just eager to make things, and when it's kind of an emergency and important that they do, and not to mention the beauty of seeing people rising to the occasion and becoming producers of masks and distributors of food and water, and, you know, just incredible how the calling kind of in people, you know, shows up when it's really needed. There are some really interesting insights there too, which we can get a little bit into. And I remember it was Jock Wilnick or some smart folk that have gone to battle and gone to war and come back to tell us some insights. And one of them is some people in war zones, they claim they have bonds with their, you know, comrades and people that they fight side by side with, that they come back and they honestly appear to have this void. They can't find any experience in normal, boring, cushy, good, if you will, real life that resembles that level of commitment to someone, of camaraderie, of care for one another, that you have when you're in these emergency kind of life or death situations.
Yeah.
So, you know,
hard times really create bonds, for sure. Yeah. I've heard about that too, like, you know, war and, you know, stuff like that really creates a sort of a brotherhood and a feeling that, you know, it's unbreakable. I sort of like, obviously, you know, keeping the proportions. When I first left Brazil and went to work in the Middle East, it was, you know, it was a hard experience, man. But like, I shared that experience with a couple of friends who feel like, you know, it feels like they're my brothers now, you know, that forever.
Yeah.
We went through some deep crap together. Yeah, totally. That stays together.
What else are we supposed to talk about?
It's next topic, something we're gonna I think you're gonna like this. And there's a lot of stuff I wanted to get out of this on this one, which is about meditation in relationship to creativity. Because I know you've been, you know, we really started going deep into meditation a few years ago, right?
Yeah, I have been meditating now for a little over 6 years, guiding weekly now for over 6 months, trying to meditate at least once a day, but you know, you can. Yeah, my meditation is very much kind of rooted in a Vipassana tradition. Mindfulness is what most people kind of hear about, as in contrast to transcendental meditation, where there's a mantra and people repeat that mantra. Mindfulness is a very different style of kind of attention exercise, and it's simply finding a point of attention, a focal point for your mind to kind of try to rest on, and using that focal point of attention to bring yourself back to the present moment, and bring your attention and yourself back to the present moment. And that's the entire exercise. It's really to acknowledge when we are lost in thought or lost in the kind of feeling world of bodily feelings, emotions, and come back to the present moment, where is actually where the world is and where things are happening. And
as a creative person, how do you correlate that with, you know, with the ability or the power of creativity? Like,
yeah,
do you feel is there like straight correlation of the days I meditate,
absolutely,
you know, like much better? Or
absolutely. You know, I've read plenty on this, and there's no real pragmatic test or scientific kind of study done on this that can 100% prove that mindfulness boosts creativity. But I'll tell you just from my experience, right? Because it is a big claim. It's a huge claim. I don't want to overclaim anything here. I don't want for anybody to say, oh, Antonio said you can sit and watch your thoughts go by for half an hour a day or whatever it is, and you become the next, you know, incredibly creative genius, which who knows? So I guess all I'm trying to say is the point of mindfulness is to come back to the present moment so that we can actually appreciate things for what they are. It's very much like Stoicism. You kind of cut the best and the worst out of your life experience as much as possible. You kind of try to sit in a much more healthy middle where you still have joy, love, compassion, and you still obviously are never going to cease to feel things like sadness and anger, but you try to kind of bring it all a little bit closer in terms of like not having crazy swings one way or another. But it's so hard to stay on topic on this because I love it so much. I can talk about it for hours. But so I'll reiterate what you're talking about so I can get into it real quick and to the point. We're trying to talk about mindfulness the correlation between mindfulness and creativity, right? And
yeah.
so, well, the first thing I would love to say is like we're born with both. So every human being, as far as I know, at least with a perfectly functioning mind, is born with this sense of present moment, sense of being present somewhere physically, sense of being in the now, and also this wonder, creativity, this sense of thinking about things that haven't happened yet, or using your capacity of memory to come up with new scenarios or come up with alternative scenarios. And so creativity, is, you could say, the mind wandering in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
And mindfulness is the realization that you're actually here in the now. And it's this back and forth between going up to the world of dreams and thoughts and creativity and back to the present moment, and so on and so forth. The problem that arises quickly, though, is in this mind world, you have this automatic rumbling going on all day, and it's not always positive, and you can't necessarily control it directly. We don't control our thoughts. We might think we do, but I'll tell you right now, don't think about a pink elephant, and there you go. You cannot control the pink elephant in your mind. So I've just subverted your ability to control your mind. But, so what we're doing with mindfulness is you teach the mind, this is up here in the mind. This is not real. It's a simulation of a past or present, a past or future scenario. And the difference, the contrast to I'm here right now, I'm looking at the fork and knife in my hand, and I'm about to eat this delicious meal, and I'm enjoying the senses coming through that. And those are happening back and forth all day. You're up there, then you come back, you realize you're having a meal, then you're up there again thinking about some past thing, and you come back and you realize you're having a meal still, and you go back, and now you're in this meeting in your head, and there's 10 people, and you're worried about 2 of them, and 2 of them you don't care about, and you're in this conversation with yourself, and you realize you're actually still having a meal. And so how wonderful if you could kind of create a separation in your mind, a space where you can see those things happen. You can see yourself in the present moment, and you can see yourself lost in thought. And once you can see that for what it is, the fears and the suffering of being lost in the wrong kind of thinking start to dissipate a lot. It's still present, but it dissipates, and it becomes more calm. And that's where then the majority of our thoughts become more creative. It's just appearing more, because your thoughts are still all jumbled, and it's still all coming automatically up to the consciousness stream, if you will. But because you're more at peace with who you are, because you're also more aware of having a mind that's both here in the present and lost in thought and taking a big step back, guess what? The kind of cloudy thoughts that are so annoying and persistent, less of them appear. And in that space, what we like to call the simple metaphor of like behind every cloud, there's the blue sky of your mind. There's more openness, literally more openness for more of the thoughts that will populate to come up with a higher quality, a brighter quality, a more creative quality, a more
without the noise, right?
The noise is still there, but the noise is now been filtered so that less of that noise is of this bad quality. A quiet mind that has very, very little noise is like, I think, in the realm of meditators that spent 30 years in caves, if so. But we'll have the noisy mind that everybody still has, but the quality of that noise will feel less crackly and more like music, maybe. It's still going to be this crazy music. And over time, maybe that music becomes even more obvious and has a beat to it. But really, the point is allowing yourself to notice that you're here, and allow your thoughts to arise and go peacefully, even if they're bad thoughts, even if they're, hurtful. And in that process, little by little, you're refining the quality of the thoughts. You can't touch them. You can't access them. You can't stop them. But you can actually look at them enough that it's almost like looking at a painting for so long that you see some of the insight the artist was having there, or whatnot. And that's it. And then, so again, the natural creativity that's in all of us just arises more often. More interestingly enough, I find myself having, you know, creative thoughts in times and places where usually I would be worried instead, with like driving or whatnot. So, and the more I boost my meditation practice, the more often I do it, and even if it's 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, the more often these kind of happy creative thoughts pop up into consciousness. And so it's a matter of like, do you want to be batting, you know, whack-a-mole style, all these bad thoughts back into the bottle, which is what we do generally, or do you want to allow this free flow of thinking, but with a certain distance, so that you're not lost in it, and then just notice just what you notice?
And that's great, man. Because one thing I do, like, I have, you know, I do recommend, you know, if you want to have like what a fully creative day, there's, you know, I created like a little schedule, like what would be my my perfectly creative day. You know, it starts on the day before, when you plan your day ahead, and you meditate. Then you like, then you fill the bucket and you look at some interesting stuff that you like, and then you go into, you know, trying to solve a creative problem. And I always had always try to think, and I think about, okay, how do I explain that meditation is gonna help people be more creative? Because like you pointed out in the beginning, there's these two things, right? Meditation being like about the present, sort of like keeping you in the present, while creativity is a little bit out there. It's a lot about going out of the present into your imagination and seeing what's there. But I love how you pointed out, meditation helps you sort of like separate those two things from your conscience, and you can sort of like watch your imagination with more, you know, with more attentiveness, with more clarity, and pick out the things you need from there and bring those into the present to be part of your idea, or, you know, of the solution that you're creating. Does that make sense?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
It's
I
really,
like
that's you simple. What I was trying to ramble about in 5 minutes, you said in 2 sentences.
Yeah, no, this is great. Because it's something, it's always been something I wanted to ask someone who is creative and, you know, a disciple of meditation as well, like you. You know, because the inner workings of the mind for me within creativity are very interesting. There's the things like I love talking about.
Love that.
Yeah, that's, you know, yeah, that's
It's
that's why it
unfortunate
works, man.
that, sorry, it's unfortunate that both of those things are turned into such myths. They're like mystified and turned into like a thing that is out there, and it's hard to achieve and you need a name for it, because it's not really at all the truth. The fact is, these are things that we're born with, and they're so deep within us that they've existed for since the beginning of time. And you can codify it and call it mindfulness, or, you know, call it whatever you want. Or there are breathing exercises, there's yoga, there are all kinds of relaxation exercises. That really, at the root level of it, is there is an intrinsic need for the mind to rest, to stop, and go into a non-doing, observing kind of mode. And I'm sure we did that a lot more throughout our history, but as we became more and more creative and more complex, and entropy really accelerated in our gene pool, then it's just become more crazier and more stressful. And I think that's why it became harder for human beings to have this natural sense of spending a little time noticing you're here, and this non-doing practice of just observing.
Yeah.
And it's something that it should be as natural to us as yawning. You know, I always find it super funny when I see any mammal yawn, because it reminds me that we have these systems within us that are so similar, you know, and some sort of like thought to make your body stretch and your lungs expand so that you can stretch your muscles and get your circulation going, all that. And it's the same, yawning and being mindful are the same thing. This is a deeply natural, deeply present behavior, but we have to just tap into it again. And you do it with you do it with a little bit of discipline in the beginning, and you find, you know, a quiet place and you close your eyes and you listen to an app or you whatever, but eventually you realize you're just tapping into something that's there. And then it becomes more about, okay, I'm going to wake up, and before rushing to grab my phone on the side of the bed, which a lot of us do, I'm going to be mindful that I'm going to do that. And the moment I notice, the probability that I'm going to have that discipline goes up a lot. And it's about that moment. It's what I always try to remind myself, and also pass on to people as I talk more about mindfulness, is the finding that precise moment between you're in control and you get lost in thought and you kind of go off on this rabbit hole, end up doing the thing automatically that you don't want to do. That's the precise moment that you're becoming more aware of with mindfulness. And because of that, more often you will take the right action.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I think it's awesome that you're helping other people and other creative people with mindfulness and discover that too. Because nowadays it's more and more important. You know, there's this author that writes about creativity, Todd Henry. He's a great guy. And in one of his books, he said, you know, there's the only time ever where humans have the ability to be entertained nonstop. You know, if you want, you don't have you can just be entertained all the time with, you know, endless Netflix shows and you know, Instagram and all this stuff. It just keeps coming. Social media just like keeps feeding stuff to you. You know, you don't have to stop. And now we have to remind ourselves to like stop and be mindful, and curate the inputs. And that's also very important for, you know, for a creative mind too. We have to like only take in, you know, quality knowledge, only take in quality information, so we can use those information as parts of the new ideas that we want to have. So it's
I love that thought, because I think there's such a big thing here you just touched on, which is everybody knows that there's too much of everything and that we need to slow down a little bit. I don't even want to get into which topic. It's almost every topic. There's too much of it. We need to slow it down. And guess what? The brain, for millions of years, all it's done is curate. Of all of the gamma rays and zeta rays and beta rays, like just to speak of the light spectrum alone, or radiation spectrum alone, or audible spectrum, or tactile spectrum, the brain has always done that, has always curated what comes into perception and becomes part of consciousness and memories, and what stays out, because it can only handle so much. And that should be a big lesson for us, to listen to our own brain, because it's been literally doing that forever. We don't have bee sight, we don't have, you know, dog smell, we don't have cat eyes, we don't have, there's so many things, you know. Empires are built by ants with just pheromones, just the little hormones that they expel from their bodies. You know, they can build these amazing structures just through the sense of smell, pretty much, you could say. Imagine if we could create a civilization by smelling one another, until the point where we look and there's a castle behind us. So like, there's so much that we don't do, and there's so much that the brain filters and doesn't even try to tackle, because it understands it's too much, naturally knows. So it's just a lesson for us to listen to.
I love this thing you said about the brain curating everything that it brings in, you know, and that's true. And
we've been pushing that wall. We've been saying, no brain, you can take a little more. No brain, one more pixel, one more sound wave, cram it in there, one more bit of information. And the brain's like, I can't handle it.
Yeah, it's true. And, you know, we're almost to the point that we need to help the brain now, and what is it that we're taking in, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, if it's too much, you know, who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah. And just notice, you know, I think noticing, again, it goes back to mindfulness and creativity. When you notice things, that's when insights come out of those things. And so noticing, you know, I love video games. The other day I played 8 hours straight. because I had a day off and I had nothing to do. My kids weren't around. My girlfriend was busy, and I played an amazing immersive game where it's literally like Ready Player One. I was in the life of some other being, right? In this case, it's Fallout 4, which I'm back on. It's an amazing piece of content. It's not even a game, it's an experience.
Yeah.
But I know that I can't do that for 3 days straight, and I shouldn't do that too often. And it's just noticing. Notice that you're doing something. You know, nobody's going to be perfect. I don't think anybody's pushing for like some cultish way of life where you have to be crazy about everything. And it's just noticing. Okay, I'm doing this too much. Okay, I noticed. Okay, I'm doing this too little. Okay, go do some push-ups.
That's another great intersection between mindfulness and creativity, man. I love that you brought that up too. You know, you notice things. You know, you consciously notice things and sort of like take note of that for later. In creativity, you know, like in mindfulness, like you have to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and you know, sort of like you know, do I really want to do that now? You know, when you notice things, and cultivating the noticing mind is good for both, right?
Absolutely.
You know, meditation is going to help you do that, and that's going to help you be more creative as well in turn.
Yeah, it's curiosity, but I think that word gets used so much. It get kind of lost its meaning a little bit, but it really is being curious. And you know, I love the concept in Buddhism of Shoshin, which is the beginner's mind. This notion that no matter how high in any subject or context you are, no matter how knowledgeable, how much of a mastery you have over something, you can always find yourself at the very bottom of the next level, at the very most beginner level of something to come, and go from there. And I love trying to do that. I'm continuing to be a beginner, continue to be curious, continue to notice things. I think that's the biggest, really, if anybody could give the biggest piece of advice I could give to any young creative ever, is go backwards, not forwards. It's to become even more of a even younger creative in your mind, because we've been born with this amazing capacity of creativity. People, oh, I'm not so creative. Guess what? There was some noise coming at you and some light beams coming at you, and you figured out language and the meaning of everything that came at you as a baby by yourself. Who taught you language? Your brain by itself, being creative, because nobody can teach a thing that you can't teach yourself. Nobody could teach the first letter of anything. And if you hadn't noticed the pattern and picked up on it and started creating language in your own brain on your own, nobody taught anything to you. You just people just put pixels and sounds in front of you, and then you come up with ideas and you come up with lessons. And a teacher is nothing more than a beam of light and sound again coming at you.
You
know, and then suddenly you know physics.
Put 1 and 2 together. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this crazy light and sound coming at you. And now you know math, what? And you're not creative somehow?
Yeah. Dude, like the just our ability to close our eyes and imagine something that is not there, that never existed. That, you know, when I talk about that stuff, I get goosebumps, because it's so basic, but it's so grand, you know. It's so amazing what we're able to do. And the best thing is, like, if you imagine it and you go work on it, you can make it real and put it, you know, where you saw it just in your mind, and now it's real in front of you. That's like the most amazing power humans can have, and that's the power of creativity. You know, that's the sort of stuff that really gets me excited.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. I think there's too many books about how to become blank. And I think we should start talking more about how to return, how to come back to
full stop.
Yeah.
Or how to become full stop, you know, or
how to be. Yeah. How to go backwards, actually, you know. I think there's another very interesting thing, which is, we talked about first ideas the other day, and I love to touch on the subject because to me is always really counterintuitive to what people think. That a lot of people say, toss your first idea out the window and go after the second and third. And by the 100th, you will have something great. And I think that may be the case sometimes, actually, especially in things like engineering or logical systems where there's math behind it. So yes, you have to try and go and go and go. And the math, the correct exactness of it will keep telling you where to go. But in subjective creative fields like arts and advertising, advertising kind of straddles both, because you have marketing, you're supposed to know the science a little bit behind what's happening, the sociology, but let's just talk about creativity at large. You know, it's the opposite, right? You can't say for sure the second idea is going to be based on some learning from the first idea because you applied math. You can literally say first idea is white elephant, second idea is blue whale, third idea is 5 pineapples at the beach. There's just no continuity. So what I love to think about is the first idea versus all other ideas, because there's something very special about just the very first idea. Neuroscientifically speaking, the first idea is the only one you will ever have when you think of a subject and nothing has come up yet, or you haven't really considered something, you never even heard of something, and you have that first idea of that comes up. It really is tapping into the superpower of your subconsciousness and your unconscious mind, because there's not enough information there yet. It's so new. Everything is very new, and it's the very first idea you've ever had on that subject. So that idea, it is tapping into, again, a much bigger, more powerful part of our minds that is most of the time locked to our view, most of the time inaccessible to us. And then the second idea, guess what? Oh, okay, I've had the first idea. Now the second idea will at least have the context of the first idea and dismiss something about it, change something about it. And now the second idea is also able to take that and place it in the world. And what happens in that moment is it puts all this context around it. And now it's like, you thought of a pink elephant and whatever, you talk this crazy thing that never existed, doesn't even have a name. But the moment it becomes an elephant, now it has to be heavy and come from a certain part in Africa and come the size and shape and the skin tone. There you go. Now your idea is tainted with all the knowledge that you have. Can they still be great ideas? Yes. And for many reasons, some of those ideas are more robust. But that untainted, clear, brand new, shiny, God knows what this is idea that is coming from some subconscious part of your brain is gone. And now everything forward, every other idea on this subject, as long as you're thinking, maybe if you take a big break, that goes away. But all the next 100 ideas will have your objective input, your bias, your opinions, your judgment, all inflicted into it. And so these ideas, and that we become these self-editors and become these rootless, knowledgeable people that we think we are, and we start creating all these problems, and we start thinking of all these things that could be wrong or not right about this idea, and our wonder and curiosity and childlike beginner mind disappears. And so, but I don't like people thinking, oh my God, he's saying just hold on to that first idea and fight to that. No, they could be crap. That idea could be terrible. I guess what I'm saying is find the beginningness again, find what's new, what's first,
what's special
again and again, so that you can continue to have first ideas even within the same team. And then that's a happy ending.
I love that notion. That first idea it is like you described, is truly special, right? It comes from somewhere else rather than from here, sort of like comes from a different place. And it, I like how you're saying that, try and have more first ideas. That's interesting. It's
awesome. The opposite of my advice for having kids. I always tell everybody to have the second kid first.
First, right?
They can.
Antonio, I'm gonna have to wrap it up. We've been talking for an hour, man. It doesn't even feel like it.
This is great. I really enjoyed you inviting me, setting it up, putting together the themes.
Oh man, I'm happy, really happy that we did it. I feel, I don't talk a lot, as you know. If you're talking about creativity, I can talk a little longer. Let's keep doing this, man.
Let's see if we can figure out what people want to hear, so that we can be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. We can ask. Like if you're watching this, what kind of stuff would you like to hear?
Wait, what? Like in a social network or something? Or a blog even? So that was great. Thank you so much, man. It was good talking with you, Leo, and getting into all this good, juicy stuff.
Cool, man. Have a great weekend.
Falou, velhinho. Abração. Até
Abraço, velho.
mais. Até mais.